My mother-in-law's silver spoon struck the rim of her porcelain plate with a sharp clink. The sound cut through the heavy air of Sunday family dinner like a knife. 7 days. Only 7 days since I'd said "I do" at St. Patrick's Cathedral. The rice from the wedding could still be stuck between the cobblestones of Greenwich Village. And here I was sitting at the dining table of the Park Avenue apartment, feeling each gaze weigh more than the last. Carol, my new mother-in-law, set her spoon down carefully. She wasn't looking at her plate, nor at the half-eaten pot roast. Her dark eyes, so much like Dan's, but without a trace of his warmth, were fixed directly on me. Her chin was raised, her lips, painted a deep red, formed a firm line. The whole family was there, Dan beside me, his brother Kevin and his wife on the other side of the table, and the widowed Aunt Teresa at the end. "Erica," Carol began, her voice as smooth as velvet, but with an edge we all recognized. "Now that the wedding madness is over and we're back to normal, there's a practical matter we need to discuss." Dan put down his fork. "Mum, can't it wait? We're eating." "This is precisely the moment," she said, not taking her eyes off me. "In this house, things are done clearly. Erica, dear, this is my home." She paused, letting the words float over the steam from the gravy, as if it were a revelation. We all knew the house was hers. Her husband Dan's father had left it to her when he died 10 years ago. It was her sanctuary, her kingdom. She mentioned it at least 3 times per visit. "And since it's my house," she continued, raising her voice slightly to silence any possible interruption, "the rules are mine. You and my son live here. You're just starting out, and in this life nothing is free." Kevin coughed, staring intently at his wine. His wife Lisa tensed up like a violin string. Aunt Teresa sighed a sound of infinite weariness. "Carol, please," Teresa murmured. "No, Teresa, this is important. Erica," my name again like a dart. "If you want to continue living under this roof, you'll have to contribute. You have your job, don't you, at that art gallery, therefore, starting next month, I expect a contribution for expenses. A rent, let's say. $500 a month seems fair. Not too much, not too little. $500 for the guest room we slept in, because the master bedroom was Sacred Carol's sanctuary, for sharing the bathroom with Kevin when he visited, for the privilege of smelling fried fish on Fridays. Yes, but also for hearing every comment, every judgment, every "in my day." The silence became absolute. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen could be heard. I felt Dan's hand searching for mine under the table. His fingers were cold. I glanced at him. His face, normally so full of light, was pale. His eyes darting from his mother to me, helpless. This was his battlefield, the silent war he had fought since childhood, a divided loyalty, and he always gave in to her for peace, for love, for custom. Everyone was waiting for my reaction. The submissive Erica, the quiet girl from a modest family in Cleveland who had snuck into their precious New York family, the one who smiled and nodded, the one who made the pot roast without garlic because Carol didn't like it, the one who endured comments about when the grandchildren would arrive with a tense smile. Carol gave a small, confident smile, sure of her victory. She had drawn her line in the sand. Either I paid, or I became the ungrateful usurper. Either I bent, or she would throw me out. It was a masterstroke. I placed my fork next to my plate with great care. I slowly wiped the corners of my mouth with the linen napkin. Then I raised my eyes and met her dark ones, and I smiled. Not a tense smile, not one of those I had practiced so many times, but a wide, genuine smile that reached my eyes, a smile that bewildered her because she blinked uncertain. "Don't you worry about that, Carol," I said, and my voice sounded clear and calm in the silent dining room. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You won't have to worry about the rent or about us living under your roof. Dan squeezed my hand tightly. Honey. Carol's brow furrowed. What do you mean I left the napkin on the table? I leaned back slightly in my chair, adopting a posture that was not confrontational, but one of relief, of liberation. I mean, I'm moving into my own place. I paused, enjoying the absolute bewilderment painted on her face, on all their faces. Kevin let out a choked sound. Lisa's eyes widened. Well, to my own townhouse, to be exact. The word townhouse landed in the room like a hydrogen bomb. Silence. Then a chorus of stifled exclamations. What? Carol said, her voice losing all its previous smoothness. It was harsh, incredulous. Erica, what are you saying? Dan's voice was a whisper of pure bewilderment, almost fear. That's impossible, Kevin blurted out, finding his voice. What are you talking about? I stood up, gently pushing back my chair. The scrape of its legs against the wood floor was the only sound. I looked around at my husband's family, at their faces, frozen in expressions of shock, disbelief, and in Carol's case, a rage that was beginning to boil under the surface. I said not to worry. I'm freeing you of our burden. Dan and I will be moving to my townhouse on the Upper East Side. That way you can have your whole house to yourself again, just the way you like it. Are you lying? Carol jumped to her feet, her chair screeching violently against the floor. Her elegance had vanished, replaced by a furious trembling. You don't have a townhouse. It's a sham. Your family is from Cleveland. You work in a gallery. Yes, work in a gallery, I agreed calmly. But my family, Carol, isn't just from Cleveland. I took a step toward the dining room door. My mother, God rest her soul, was a Winthrop. The surname meant nothing to Kevin or Lisa, but I saw Aunt Teresa's face change, how her tired eyes widened. Carol, too, froze. In certain New York circles, the name Winthrop carried a weight associated with sprawling estates, inherited fortunes, a kind of old discreet wealth that made a Park Avenue apartment look modest. Your mother, Carol stammered, her confidence crumbling. Eleanor Winthrop. The very same, I confirmed with a slight nod. The estate was settled 6 months ago. The house is mine. I was just waiting for the right moment to move in. My gaze met Dan's. He was livid, looking at me as if he'd never seen me before. And in a way he hadn't. I think that moment is now. Erica, wait. So Dan stood up, knocking over his chair. Why didn't you tell me anything? A townhouse. The Winthrops. My God. You had other worries, I said softly, my gaze briefly flickering to Carol, who was now leaning on the table as if her legs were about to give way. And I needed to be sure. Of many things. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the dining room. I didn't run. I walked with a steady pace down the hallway. I took my bag and my jacket from the coat rack by the front door. I felt the weight of their stares on my back, the deafening silence I was leaving behind. Erica, Dan's voice, desperate, sounded behind me as I had my hand on the doorknob. I turned. He was at the end of the hall, his face distraught. Behind him, in the dining room doorway, Carol's rigid silhouette was framed, and further be the curious and stunned faces of the others. Come find me at the plaza when you want to talk, I told him, and my voice didn't tremble. But right now I need some air. I need to get out of your house. I opened the door and stepped out onto the landing into the cool New York night air. The door closed behind me with a soft click, muffling the sounds from the apartment. The beginning of a choked cry from Carol Dan's confused voice, the chaos I had just sown. I didn't go down the stairs right away. I leaned against the cold wall of the landing, and only then, when the solid wooden door separated me from them, did I let my body tremble. It wasn't fear, it was adrenaline. It was the release of 7 days, 7 months, 7 centuries of smiling and enduring. I shook my head, straightened my shoulders, and walked down the stairs. In my jacket pocket, my phone was already vibrating. A call from Dan. I looked at it, the screen lighting up the dim lobby. I didn't answer. No. I still had to call Martha, my lawyer, and then the security company to have them open the house on East 72nd Street. My house. My townhouse. I smiled to myself, a real smile, as I stepped out onto the street and disappeared into the Sunday night crowd. The game had finally begun. The New York night air hit my face, cool and filled with the city's murmur. I closed my eyes for a moment, leaning against the cold stone of the building's entrance. Inside my purse, the phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Dan. 1, 2, 3, missed calls. Then a text. Erica, please come back. Let's talk. Where are you? I didn't reply. I couldn't. Not yet. I walked reply. I couldn't. Not yet. I walked aimlessly away from Park Avenue, away from that apartment that was never a home. The sidewalk echoed under my heels. I passed terraces full of laughing people, couples strolling the normal life of any given Sunday. I had just detonated mine. My thoughts turned not to the dining room scene, but further back to my mother, Eleanor Winthrop, though everyone called her Ellie. A petite woman with greying hair, always pulled back in a neat bun, and eyes that saw everything. She died of cancer 2 years ago. A swift and fierce illness that took her in a matter of months. It was on her deathbed, in a private room at Lenox Hill, that she told me everything. I remember the smell of antiseptic, the soft hum of the machines, her incredibly fragile hand in mine. Erica, darling, you have to listen to me, she whispered, her voice a broken silk thread. I've done things a certain way to protect you. From the vultures, from the family. With my eyes swollen from crying, I could only nod. Mum, don't talk about that now. Rest. No, now or never. She took a breath, a painful sound. The townhouse on 72nd Street is yours. The entire main floor and the investments. The trust. Martha has all the papers. Martha, I repeated, confused. Martha Hayes, her lawyer forever. A woman as stern as she was efficient. I raised you away from all this, honey. Away from New York, from the Winthrops, their expectations and their poisons. In Cleveland with your father, it was a simple life, the one I wanted for you. A coughing fit shook her. When it passed, her eyes shone with a feverish urgency. But blood is blood. You are a Winthrop, and what is yours is yours. Don't let anyone make you feel small, or make you ask permission to occupy your own space in the world. At that moment, I didn't understand the depth of her words. I just wanted her to stop suffering. I know, Mum. Promise me. When I'm gone, you take the reins of your life, of your inheritance. Don't hide. It's not something to be ashamed of. Her hand squeezed mine with surprising strength. And be careful who you tell, darling. Money changes people, even the ones you love. I had thought about those words many times during my engagement to Dan, when I first met Carol with her assessing gazes and her questions disguised as curiosity. And your parents, Erica, what do they do? My simple answer. My father was a high school teacher, he's passed. My mother was a homemaker. It wasn't a lie, it was a half-truth, and a mission my mother had advised me to keep. Let them love you for you first, she once told me. The rest will come later. But later never came because I fell in love with Dan. Dan with his easy smile and his painter's hands, who knew nothing of stocks or estates, who loved the smell of oil paint and the light of a New York sunset. With him being just Erica, the girl from the art gallery, was enough. It was liberating. And at first the secret wasn't heavy. Then it got a little heavier every day. The phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't Dan. It was a familiar number. Erica. The voice on the other end was clear, professional, without a trace of sleepiness, despite it being a Sunday night. Martha. Yes, Martha, it's me. I got your message. It's time. Did something happen? No preamble. She was direct as a missile. It happened. I told Dan's family. Well, my mother-in-law, to be exact. A short, dry laugh escaped me. She asked me to pay rent to live in her house. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Then an, I see. I could almost picture her raising an eyebrow in her office on Madison Avenue. And you dropped the house bomb on her. I dropped the house bomb. And the family name. Well, it was about time. And Dan is shocked, knows nothing about anything. He's calling me non-stop. He'll have to process it. Her tone was practical, uncompromising. Where are you now? Walking around the Upper West Side, I think. Go to the plaza. I'm booking you a suite. I'll be there in half an hour, with the documents you need, the ones for the house, and also for the trust. It's better you have them physically. Martha, do you think I did the right thing? The question slipped out before I could stop it. A crack in the facade of security I had just displayed. Martha sighed, and her voice softened just a little. Erica, your mother didn't want you living your life asking for permission, much less being charged for the air you breathe in a house that isn't yours. You've put up with more than you should have for that boy. Now it's time to play your hand face up. What happens next, we'll see. But you'll be in your own house, literally. She hung up. Martha was never one for many words of comfort, but her logic was an anchor. She was right. My mother didn't leave me that inheritance so I could grovel. I sent a message to Dan. I'm fine. I need space. I'm not coming back tonight. We'll talk tomorrow. Then I silenced my phone. The suite at the plaza was spacious, quiet, with views of Central Park. I took off my shoes and sank into the sofa, feeling the weight of the day in my bones. Not an hour had passed when the doorbell rang. It was Martha. Martha Hayes was a woman in her late 50s, impeccably dressed in a grey pantsuit, her short silver hair slicked back. She carried a thick leather folder under her arm. She entered, gave the suite a critical look, and nodded in approval. At least you're treating yourself well, she said, placing the folder on the coffee table. Sit down, talk. I told her everything. The dinner, the demand for $500. Carol's expression. Dan's the bomb I had dropped. Martha listened motionless, her clear eyes never leaving mine. Predictable, she said when I finished. Mrs. Carol Valverde is a woman accustomed to ruling her small fiefdom. Looking at it from the outside, it was a power play to put you in your place economically and symbolically. What she didn't calculate were your cards. She opened the folder. Your cards are quite good, Erica. She took out several documents, spreading them out before me. Blueprints, notarized deeds, bank statements. The property at 215 East 72nd Street, prime Upper East Side. 4,500 square feet on the main floor with a terrace and park views. Paid for free of liens. In your name since the execution of the will 6 months ago. She ran a finger over the deed. The condo fees and taxes have been covered by the trust. The house is furnished, ready. The keys. She placed a heavy key ring with a single modern key and a remote on the table. Then another document. The trust established by your mother. A combination of conservative investments, fixed income fund shares, some rental properties. It generates a more than considerable income. You don't need to work at the gallery, Erica. although I understand you like it." She stated it as a fact, not a judgment. I nodded. I liked my job. I liked art. The silence of the gallery discovering new artists. It wasn't a job. It was my life, or a part of it. "And now what?" I asked, looking at the keys shimmering under the lamp's light. "Now you have two options. The first, present the documents, move in, and get on with your life. Let your husband and his family digest the blow as they can. The second, use it as leverage to negotiate to change the dynamics." She looked at me intently. "Your mother left you independence. How you use it is up to you, but I advise you to talk to Dan first. He is your husband. He deserves an explanation, even if he doesn't like it." She was right again. My heart ached thinking of his face, of the confusion and pain I saw in his eyes. I loved him. That was the problem. I loved him, and I had lied to him by omission for years. "He'll come," I said almost to myself. "Either tonight or early tomorrow." "Probably," Martha assented. "In the meantime, I'll take care of notifying the security agency. The house is closed but maintained. By first thing tomorrow, they can have it ready with the heating on and the fridge stocked. If you want, you just have to say the word." "Yes, please." I took a deep breath. "Have it ready." Martha nodded, gathered her things, and stood up. At the door, she turned. "Erica, one more thing. Don't feel guilty. Your secret wasn't malicious, it was protective. Your mother did it to protect her legacy, and you maintained it to protect your relationship. Now it's time to protect yourself and your marriage if it's worth it." When she left, the silence of the suite was absolute. I walked to the window and looked out at the illuminated city. Out there to the east was 72nd Street. My house, my townhouse. The word still felt strange. The phone, despite being silenced, lit up the table. This time it wasn't a call, but an avalanche of messages from the family group chat, a group Carol had created for important family matters. I had muted it weeks ago. With slightly trembling fingers, I opened it. "Carol, Erica. This is no way to behave. You must come back and explain this farce. Dan is devastated. Kevin, Mom, calm down. Erica. Is it really true about the Winthrops? Are you related to the Winthrops from the construction group? Lisa. How dramatic. A townhouse. Kev. Honey, did you know anything? Aunt Teresa, Erica. Dear, call me when you can. No pressure. Carol. Answer me, Erica. This is disrespectful. Where are you? Dan, please leave her alone. Erica, honey, answer. I just want to know you're okay. The last message was from Dan, a private one, 10 minutes after the group chat. I'm at the entrance to the plaza. The concierge won't give me the room number. Please talk to me. I'm waiting in the lobby. My heart leaped. He had come. He hadn't waited until morning. I looked at myself in the foyer mirror, wearing the same simple dress from dinner. My hair a bit messy. My eyes, however, had a new determination, a hardness that wasn't there before. I wasn't going to go down with my tail between my legs. I was going down to talk to my husband, to tell him the whole truth. I put on my shoes, took the folder of documents Martha had left me, and the keyring. I held it tightly, like a talisman, like a shield. As I left the room, the sound of the door closing was final. It was the sound of one chapter ending and another much more uncertain about to begin. The lobby of the plaza at 11 p.m. was a world apart. Soft piano chords floated in the air, mixed with the discreet murmur of conversations and the clinking of glasses. It smelled of fresh flowers and old luxury. And there, in the midst of that serene elegance, was Dan. I saw him from the elevator, standing like a post next to a marble column, the same jacket he wore at dinner, unbuttoned, wringing his hands. His gaze anxiously scanned the elevator doors. When he saw me, his body tensed even more, if that was possible. He looked like he had aged 10 years in an hour. I walked toward him, feeling the thick carpet under my feet. Martha's folder, heavy and full of truth, was held firmly under my arm, the key ring in my jacket pocket. "Erica," he said, his voice hoarse. He took my arm gently but with urgency. "Please, let's talk. Can we go somewhere, the terrace?" "Right here is fine," I said, gently pulling away. I pointed to a more private corner with 2 leather armchairs separated by a low coffee table. "Let's sit." He nodded, his gaze lost. We sat facing each other. The pianist in the corner began to play a slow melody. "Are you okay?" was the first thing he asked. And in his eyes, I saw genuine concern. And pain. A lot of pain. "Where have you been? Why this hotel?" "I needed space, Dan. I needed to breathe air that wasn't poisoned in that house." I looked at him directly. "And I needed to talk to Martha." "Martha? Your lawyer," he said, the name clicking into place in his mind like a piece of a twisted puzzle. "Your mother's lawyer. The one who managed everything." "A townhouse." The question burst from him, loaded with all the accumulated bewilderment. "On the Upper East Side. The Winthrops. For God's sake, what is happening? Who are you?" "I'm the same person I've always been," I whispered. "The one you met at that Portuguese painters exhibition. The one who got nervous when you invited me for coffee. The one who married you last week. But you didn't tell me you were a millionaire." His voice rose slightly, and a couple of heads turned in our direction. He lowered his tone, forcing the words through his teeth. "Why? Why did you hide it from me? Didn't you trust me?" There it was. The question I feared most, the one I had asked myself 1,000 times. At first, I began choosing my words carefully, because my mother asked me to. She wanted people to love me for me, not for my name or my bank account. You loved me for me, and it was wonderful, it was real. I took a breath. Then when I met your family, your mother, I saw how she looked at people, how she measured, how she judged. I was afraid that if she knew, everything would be different. She would pressure you to, I don't know, ask for money, invest in something. Or worse, she'd despise me for being a rich girl playing bohemian in a gallery. I didn't want that judgment. I wanted a fair chance. "A fair chance," he repeated, bitterness in his voice. "By lying to me." "I didn't lie. I omitted. It's different." "No, Erica. It's not different." He ran a hand through his hair, desperate. "This is my life. Our life. It's fundamental. And the house. For months, years. You've had a house here in New York, and you've been living like a guest in my mother's, sleeping in the guest room, putting up with her comments. God, it feels like a sick joke." "It wasn't a joke," I said, my voice hardening. "It was a choice. A stupid choice, perhaps. I thought if I put up with it, if I showed I wasn't a snob, that I could adapt, things would change. That your mother would accept me. And then when the time was right, I would tell you everything, and we would move into our own place together." I opened the folder on the small table. "This is our place, Dan." I took out the documents. The first page was a copy of the deed. I slid the paper toward him. "Look, 215 East 72nd Street, main floor, 4,500 square feet. In my name, no liens." He picked up the paper with slightly trembling fingers. His eyes scanned the lines, the notary's seal. My full name, Erica Winthrop Mendoza. He put it on the table as if it burned him. And this, I continued, pulling out a summarized statement from the trust, is part of the rest. The investments, the income. It's not that I'm a millionaire, Dan. It's that I don't need to work. I work because I want to. He didn't even look at the second document. He was looking at me, and in his eyes there was a storm of emotions: disbelief, pain, betrayal, and a spark of something that could have been hope or resentment. And when was the right moment going to be, Erica? He asked, his voice now flat tired. After my mother collected the second rent check, when you had to scrub the bathroom to pay for food. That's not fair. I didn't ask you to pay anything. You never asked me to contribute. It was her today, and it was the last straw. I wasn't going to stay there paying for the privilege of being despised. I'm not that stupid. And me? What am I in all this? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Your husband, the idiot who didn't know who he was marrying, who defended his humble girlfriend when his mother dropped hints, who fought with her because she didn't treat you as an equal. It was all a farce. You were there laughing at us in silence. It hurt. It hurt deeply. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I never laughed at you, Dan. I swear I love you, and that's why I kept quiet. For fear of losing you, for fear that this, I pointed to the documents, would change what we have. And look what's happening. It already has. He leaned back in the armchair, staring at the vaulted ceiling. He seemed defeated. So now what? What do you want me to do? Move into your townhouse with you and live like a prince consort. Leave my mother there with a knife between her teeth, thinking I'm a gold digger. You don't have to do anything, I said, my voice sounding cold even to my own ears. I'm moving into my house tomorrow. You can stay on Park Avenue, or you can come with me, or we can take some time. You decide. Don't make me choose like that, he exploded, slamming his palm on the table. The noise startled the pianist, who missed a beat for a second. We just got married. This is supposed to be our honeymoon, not a Cold War with paperwork involved. The war was started by your mother, Dan, I reminded him in a tense whisper. Not me. I just defended myself with the weapons I have. He stood up, turning his back. His shoulders rose and fell with his agitated breathing. I watched him, my heart in a fist. I had gambled big. I had lost control of the situation. But I had won my freedom. The price, however, could be him. I need to think, he said finally, without turning. I need some air. This is too much. Dan, I called out, and this time my voice trembled. Do you still love me? He turned slowly. His face was a mask of confusion and pain. I don't know, Erica. Right now, I don't even know who you are. His words were a dagger. I stood up too, gathering the documents. Then go. Think. When you know the answer, you know where to find me. At my house on 72nd Street, or here at the hotel until tomorrow. He nodded, a bitter grimace on his lips. Your house. It sounds so strange. He took a step toward me, and for a second I thought he was going to hug me, or kiss me, or yell at me, but he just walked past. Tomorrow, he murmured, and walked away through the luxurious lobby, away from me. I sank back into the armchair, feeling empty. I had won the battle, but I might have lost the war. My phone, still silenced, lit up again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. I opened it cautiously. Erica, it's Kevin. I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Don't tell Dan. It's about my mother and certain family matters. Can you meet for coffee tomorrow? Kevin, the ambitious brother. What did he want? Information. An alliance. The game was clearly not over. It had just moved to a new board. Before I could reply, another message came in, this time from Aunt Teresa. Dear, I know this must be a horrible night, but about your mother, Eleanor Winthrop. Many years ago, your mother and I served on a charity committee together. She was an admirable woman, brave, like you were tonight. When you want to talk, call me. Perhaps I can help you understand my sister-in-law. She has her reasons, though they don't justify her actions. Take care. A potential ally in the enemy camp, or maybe just another moving piece. Exhausted, I put the phone away. The tears finally came. Silent, bitter tears, for no one but myself and the pianist, who continued to play his sad melody in the corner, while I cried in silence at the plaza. In the apartment on Park Avenue, the storm was raging. Carol hadn't been able to sleep. She had called all her contacts, her friends from the club, her financial advisor, even the building's superintendent, who had a cousin who was a notary. The Winthrops. Yes, of course I know them. An old friend had told her, her voice thick with gossip. The Winthrops from Connecticut with the huge estates. And the widow, the only daughter, married a professor, I think. Went to live in Ohio, away from it all. But the fortune, Carol, is monumental. If your daughter-in-law is one of them, well, you'd better not have offended her. Carol hung up pale. It wasn't a farce. It was real. And she had asked her for $500 in rent. The humiliation burned in her gut, but it was surpassed by a cold panic. What if Erica turned Dan against her? What if she took her son to that townhouse and she was left alone, turned into the witch? All of New York would talk about him. No, she said aloud in the empty living room. She couldn't allow it. She had to regain control. She had to talk to Dan, make him see. But Dan hadn't come home. The doorbell rang. It was Kevin, accompanied by a visibly excited Lisa. Mum, is it true, is Erica a Winthrop from the construction company? Kevin asked without a greeting. His eyes shining with a light Carol knew too well, opportunity. It seems so, Carol said coldly, sitting back down in her armchair wrapped in her silk robe. Although she hasn't shown me any papers, they could be fake. I've been searching online, Lisa said, pulling out her phone. Look, here's a Society news item from years ago. The discreet wedding of Eleanor Winthrop to Professor Mendoza. And here in the corner of the photo is that her right. It's Erica as a little girl. Carol took the phone. The photo was poor quality, but you could recognize the dark-haired girl next to an elegant woman. Her heart turned to ice. It was true. All of it. That doesn't matter now, Kevin said, sitting opposite her. What matters now is Dan. He knew. He wasn't as surprised as we were. More. Carol pressed her lips together. He went after her. He hasn't come back. If he goes with her. Kevin left the sentence hanging in the air. If he moves into a townhouse on the Upper East Side, Mom, the possibilities. For Dan and for us. That family has connections, influence. It could be a great opportunity for Dan's gallery, for my business. Carol looked at him with contempt. Are you planning to profit from this? This lie? It's not a lie, it's luck, Kevin corrected impatiently. Dan married an heiress. It's a good thing. You're the one who messed it all up with your stupid rent demand. Who does that? This is my house, Carol exploded, standing up. And she has a better one, Kevin retorted, also rising. Don't you get it? You have no power over her anymore. Or over Dan if he sides with her. You've lost Mum. Unless what? Carol asked in a dangerously low voice. Kevin stepped closer. Unless you make sure Dan doesn't side with her, that he sees the lie, the deception, that he feels so betrayed he chooses to stay here with you, with his family. Carol looked at him, her son, the ambitious, the practical one. He didn't care about Dan's love or his happiness. He cared about access to that wealth, to that world. And suddenly their interests aligned. She didn't want to lose her son. Kevin wanted to gain influence. For both, it was crucial to separate Dan from Erica. "And how do we do that?" Carol asked, her voice now controlled, cold as marble. Kevin smiled a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Leave it to me. I'll talk to him. And you, Mum, you're going to have to do something very difficult." "What? Apologize?" Carol placed a hand on her chest, as if she'd been stabbed. "Never. To her." "No, no. Not to her. To Dan. Tell him you got carried away, you were stressed, you just wanted to help with expenses, but you handled it badly. That you regret it. That you want to fix it." Kevin's voice was now soft, persuasive. "Win Dan over. Make him see that his family is here. His mother, who loves him. Meanwhile, I'll take care of making Mrs. Winthrop show her true colours as a liar and a snob." Carol took a deep breath, the humiliation of apologizing, of humbling herself. But it was for Dan to not lose him. She nodded slowly. "All right. But do it right, Kevin. We can't fail." "We won't fail," Kevin said, and his gaze shifted to the window, to the New York night, where his brother and his mysterious wife were fighting their own battle. That's what family is for. The morning came with a cold, clear light filtering through the heavy curtains of the suite. I hadn't slept. I lay on the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every look from the night before. The pain in Dan's voice, the emptiness he left when he walked away, and deep down, a spark of anger. Anger at Carol for forcing this situation. Anger at myself for not being brave sooner. Anger at the world for making money change everything always. At 8 a.m., the phone rang. It was Martha. "The house is ready, the heat is on, the fridge has the basics. The cleaning service came through first thing. The keys are at reception under your name. Are you heading over?" "Yes," I answered in a hoarse voice. "Today." "Good. And Erica. Dan came last night. He left. He's hurt." Martha sighed on the other end of the line. "It's understandable. Give him time. But don't let him make you feel guilty. You didn't rob a bank. You inherited what was yours." She hung up. Her words were a logical balm, but they didn't soothe the ache in my chest. I got dressed in jeans and a simple sweater. Nothing that looked like the owner of a townhouse. I went down for breakfast, but the coffee tasted like ash. Just as I was paying the bill, I saw him enter the lobby. Dan looked like he had aged another decade. Sunken eyes, a day's worth of stubble, the same wrinkled clothes from last night. He met my gaze and walked over as if each step was a heavy burden. "Hi," he said, his voice a rough whisper. "Hi." I didn't know what else to say. "Want some coffee?" He shook his head. I came to have you show me the house." He pronounced the last word as if it were in a foreign language. "Dan, please." "Erica." "I need to see it. I need to understand." I nodded. There was no going back. "All right. Let's go." The taxi ride was silent, uncomfortable. I looked out the window. He looked at his hands. The driver hummed along to a song on the radio. The distance between the plaza and 72nd Street was short, but every block seemed like a chasm. The building was majestic, made of pale stone with an impeccable facade and a carved solid wood door. It wasn't a modern apartment block. It was a renovated mansion with only 2 residences per floor. I got out of the taxi and Dan followed, looking at the facade with disbelief. "This is 215, I said unnecessarily. I took out the keyring. It wasn't just a key, but a fob to open the grand main entrance, which clicked open smoothly. We entered a private vestibule with a marble floor, a wrought iron spiral staircase leading to the upper floor, and a discreet elevator. It smelled of beeswax and lemon clean and empty. The elevator is just for this unit and the one above, I explained, pressing the button. The doors opened silently. We went up. When they opened again, we were in a foyer that was larger than Carol's entire living room. Light poured in through towering windows that opened onto a long balcony and beyond the treetops of Central Park. The floors were dark, gleaming hardwood. The walls were high and white, some with plaster moldings. There was modern but classic furniture, a huge linen sofa, leather armchairs, a massive worn Persian rug in the center, large abstract paintings on the walls. My mother had good taste. It was elegant, sober, expensive, and completely devoid of life. Dan said nothing. He walked in like a sleepwalker, crossed the foyer, and looked into the main living room. His eyes widened even more. The room was enormous, with a black marble fireplace and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. At the far end, glass doors opened onto a covered terrace with plants. "Oh my God," he finally murmured, his voice echoing in the empty space. There are 6 bedrooms, 4 full baths, a kitchenette, and a main kitchen, a study, a home theatre. I listed mechanically like a real estate agent. The terrace is about 800 square feet. The views are of the park. 800 square feet, he repeated, as if he didn't understand the concept. His own art gallery wasn't 800 square feet in total. He walked to the center of the room, turning slowly, taking it all in. His gaze went from the paintings to the furniture to the designer lamp hanging from the high ceiling. There was no joy on his face, only astonishment and deep confusion. "And all of this is yours?" he asked, turning to me. "Just yours?" "Yes, inherited from my mother, in my name." "And how much is this worth?" "I don't know exactly. Several million. Martha has the details." He let out a short, dry, humorless laugh. "Several million. And I gave you silver earrings for your birthday, and we argued about whether we could afford to go to Miami or California for vacation." His tone tore me apart. "Dan, that didn't matter. Vacation with you in California would have been perfect. I'm wearing the earrings now." And it was true. The small silver earrings in the tiny shape of a paintbrush were glinting on my earlobes. "Of course it matters," he exploded, his voice booming in the empty living room. "It matters because it changes everything. It changes the balance, the perspective. I thought we were a team. 2 people starting out with unstable jobs, with dreams, fighting together against my mother, saving for an apartment. And all this time you had this." He swept his arm around the space in a wide, furious gesture. "And you let me make plans, dream about a 30-year mortgage debate if we could afford a child. God, Erica, you must have been laughing at me inside." "Never!" I shouted, and the tears I'd held back since last night finally burst forth. "I never laughed at you. I loved you. I love you. Your dreams were my dreams. This," I pointed around us, "this isn't a dream, it's a house. A huge, empty, cold house that I inherited from a mother who died too young. I'd take our guest room on Park Avenue 1,000 times over as long as you were with me." "Really?" he asked. And now he came closer to me, his face inches from mine. His eyes, normally so warm, were filled with pain and anger. "Do you really prefer it? Because you had no problem walking out of there at the first opportunity, coming to your palace and leaving me there with the mess you made." "So I didn't make the mess. Your mother asked me for money to live in her house. She backed me into a corner, and you dropped the nuclear bomb. You could have talked to me privately. You could have told me your secret, and then together we could have found a way to tell her. But no, you chose drama, the grand gesture, humiliating her in front of the whole family. Was that it, revenge? I was speechless. Was that true? A part of me had enjoyed seeing Carol's face hitting back with such force. No, it wasn't just revenge, I said, but my voice sounded weak. It was. I was fed up, Dan. Fed up with bowing my head. And when she asked for the money, it was the last straw. I reacted. Maybe it wasn't the best way, but I exploded. He turned away, rubbing his face with his hands. So, what am I supposed to do now, Erica? Move in here with you? Become the gentleman who lives off his wife? Leave my mother, who with all her flaws raised me alone after my father died, to rot in her house thinking her son is a gold digger? You're not a gold digger. You're my husband. A husband who didn't think to sign a prenup because his wife didn't have a dime. Or did you? Did Martha make you sign something without me knowing? There was suspicion in his voice now, a suspicion that cut me like a knife. No, I whispered, feeling dirty. There's no prenup. My mother suggested it, but I refused because I trusted you. His shoulders slumped. The internal struggle was visible in every fibre of his body. I don't know who you are, he repeated just like last night. I don't know if the woman I fell in love with exists, or if it was just a role you were playing. And I don't know. I don't know if I want to live in this museum. He looked around with disdain. It's beautiful, it's impressive, and it has no soul. It has nothing of us. His words hit me with unexpected force. It was true. The house was magnificent, but it was a shell, a monument to my mother's past, not ours. There were no of our books on the shelves, no of our crooked pictures on the wall, no of the ugly mug he used for coffee that I hated. We could give it a soul, I said, but it sounded like a plea, not a declaration. Together. He looked at me, and for a second I saw the man I had fallen in love with peek through the pain, but it was only for a second. I need time, Erica. Real time. Not here. At my studio or the gallery or anywhere that doesn't smell like old money and secrets. He nodded as if confirming it to himself. I'm going to leave. I'm not going back to my mother's yet. I'm going to stay a couple of days at the gallery. I have a sofa bed there. Dan, please. No, Erica. Not for now. He walked to the door, then turned. I love you, or I loved the woman I thought you were. But this, I need to breathe. And you need to decide what you want. Do you want to be Erica, my wife? Or Mrs. Winthrop, the heiress who lives in a townhouse? Because sometimes I don't think you can be both. And with that, he left. The sound of his worn shoes on the marble floor of the vestibule echoed until the elevator door closed. And then silence, a huge, expensive, empty silence. I collapsed onto the linen sofa, which smelled of clean fabric and dust, and I cried. I cried for my fracturing marriage, for Dan's anger, for the loneliness of this immense house, and for my mother, who perhaps with her good intentions had condemned me to this. While I cried in my empty living room on Park Avenue, the morning was tense and full of maneuvers. Carol, following Kevin's advice, had prepared Dan's favourite breakfast, freshly squeezed orange juice toast with avocado. She waited for him at the table, dressed in a comfortable sweatsuit, not her usual formal attire. She wanted to appear vulnerable, repentant. But Dan didn't show up. Instead, she got a call from Kevin. Mum, I've been asking around. The townhouse on 72nd exists, and it's hers, or a trust in her name. It's legit. Carol squeezed the glass of orange juice. How much? It's not for sale, so it's hard to know. But given the location, the square footage, we're talking about 4 or 5 million. easily. And that's just the property. There's more according to my contacts. Investments, a substantial portfolio. A heavy silence fell over the line. 5 million was a figure she couldn't even imagine. Her apartment in a good area was worth maybe one, and it was half paid off. And what about Dan? Carol asked in a hoarse voice. We have to be smart. He's there now, right with her. I don't know. He hasn't come back, Kevin muttered. You have to find him. You have to talk to him before she brainwashes him. Make him see she lied to him for years. That this isn't normal. Insist on family, on loyalty. I know that, Kevin, Carol said, irritated. But what if he chooses the townhouse? What if he goes to live there? Then, Kevin said, his voice turning cold and calculating, then we have to make sure he doesn't cut off our access to him or to his money. You're his mother. You have rights. And he's my brother. Family first, right? Carol didn't answer. Kevin's ambition was too transparent. But in this case, their goals coincided. She couldn't lose Dan. She hung up and called her son's cell. It went straight to voicemail. Dan, honey, it's Mum. Please call me. I'm so sorry, really. It was a mistake to ask Erica for money. I was stressed. I wasn't thinking. I just want to talk, son. I love you. Call me. She left the phone on the table. The orange juice no longer looked appealing. She got up and went to the window. Out there, somewhere in New York, her son was with a woman who could buy and sell her 10 times over. A woman she had despised. Fear. A deep, icy fear gripped her. It wasn't just the money. It was the control. She had lost control. Just then the doorbell rang. It wasn't Dan. It was her sister-in-law, Teresa. I came to see if there was any news, Teresa said, entering with her usual calm air. She was carrying a small container. I brought you some frittata. I know you probably haven't eaten. I'm not hungry, Carol said, but she let her sister-in-law into the kitchen. And Dan. I don't know. With her, I suppose. Teresa put the frittata in the fridge and sat down at the table across from Carol. She looked at her with her clear, tired eyes. Carol, what were you trying to do with the rent thing? Seriously. It's my house, my rules. Carol snapped, but without conviction. Your house, yes, but she is his wife. Your daughter-in-law, not a tenant. Teresa sighed. And now look at the mess you've made. The girl isn't just anybody. She's a Winthrop. She has class and she has resources. And you treated her like a servant. I didn't know who she was. That's the worst part. You treated her badly without knowing. What if she had been a nobody, as you say? Would it have been okay to demand money from her to make her feel inferior? Teresa shook her head. Sometimes, Carol, you're just like your mother-in-law, and you know how much you suffered with her. The comparison hit Carol like a punch. Her mother-in-law, a cold, domineering woman who had never considered her good enough for her son, who always reminded her she was living in her house. It's different, she murmured, but without force. It's not. And now you either apologize for real or you lose your son. He loves her. You could see it at the wedding. And if you force him to choose, he might not choose his bossy mother. Carol said nothing. She looked out the window. Teresa was right, and she knew it. But apologizing to that girl stuck in her throat. I'm going to try to talk to her, Teresa said, getting up. With Erica. Maybe I can build a bridge. Why? Carol asked suspiciously. Because I like her. And because your son is happy with her. Or was. And because, she added, picking up her bag, her mother Eleanor was kind to me at a time when no one else was. I owe her that. Teresa left, leaving Carol more alone and more confused than ever. The war was no longer just with Erica. It was with her own son, with her own past, and with the ghost of a mother-in-law who suddenly looked too much like herself. The silent townhouse was a giant, empty organ, and every little noise, the creak of wood, the faint hum of the elevator, the distant rumble of the street reverberated like a phantom heartbeat. I sat on the edge of the linen sofa, feeling the weight of the space around me. The crying had dried up, leaving only a dense fatigue and a void in my chest where the certainty of my marriage once beat. Dan's words. Sometimes I don't think you can be both echoed in my head like a poisoned refrain. He was right. Was Erica, the gallery girl, Dan's wife, incompatible with Erica Winthrop, the heiress? My mother never saw it that way. For her, the inheritance was a tool, not an identity. But she had walked away from all this. She had chosen a simple life with my father. I, however, had returned. And I had returned with a lie. The buzzer from the street transmitted through the video intercom at the entrance startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. Dan. Had he come back? I ran to the panel, my heart racing, but the screen didn't show my husband's anguished face, but that of a serene older woman with her grey hair in a neat bun. Aunt Teresa. Doubt paralyzed me for a moment. What did she want? Was she coming on Carol's behalf to scold me? But I remembered her message from last night. Perhaps I can help you understand my sister-in-law. And she had mentioned my mother. Curiosity and a desperate need for non-confrontational human contact won out. I pressed the button to open the street door. Minutes later, the soft chime of the apartment door sounded. When I opened it, I found Teresa holding a small wicker basket. It smelled of freshly baked bread. "Erica, dear," she said with a sad but kind smile. "I'm sorry to show up like this unannounced. I thought you might not want to be alone, and that maybe you hadn't had breakfast." She lifted the basket slightly. "I brought coffee and some muffins I made this morning to calm the nerves." A wave of gratitude so intense washed over me that I almost started crying again. "Please come in, Teresa. That's very kind of you." She entered, and her expert gaze, that of a woman accustomed to elegant surroundings, swept over the foyer and living room without showing astonishment, only a faint recognition. "Your mother had exquisite taste. This has her touch, serene classic, but alive." "You knew her?" I said, more a statement than a question, as I led her to the more welcoming kitchenette. It was spacious and modern, with an island and stools. "Many years ago," she assented, placing the basket on the marble countertop, and starting to take out a thermos cups and a cloth with still warm muffins. "It was on a committee for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, fundraising for restorations. I was the younger brother's wife, newly married, very lost. She was the Eleanor Winthrop. Everyone watched her, but she was the only one who came over to chat with me to make me feel welcome. She told me these things were always a circus, but it was worth it for the art." She poured 2 cups of divinely smelling coffee. She was kind without being condescending, a rarity. I took the cup, warming my hands on it. Teresa's words painted the mother I knew, but in a setting I had only imagined. She never talked much about that life, about New York, her family here. "She left," Teresa said, simply sitting on a stool. "She found your father a man who wanted nothing from her world, and she escaped in a way, created her own world. That requires a strong character and a lot of courage." She looked at me directly. "I think you've inherited that courage. What happened last night was a brutal course correction, but it was brave." "It was impulsive," I corrected bitterly. "And maybe stupid. I've lost Dan." "Oh dear, you haven't lost him," she said with a calmness that irritated me slightly. "He's hurt. His male pride, his idea of the relationship, it's all been shaken. He needs time to rearrange the pieces, but he loves you. Even last night, it shone through the anger. He said he didn't know who I was, and it's normal for him to feel that way right now. You've shown him a huge part of yourself that he didn't know. It's like suddenly discovering your wife speaks fluent Mandarin. It's surprising, and you wonder why she never shared it before. She took a sip of coffee. The problem isn't the wealth, Erica. It's the secret and the way it came out. Carol. Well, Carol lit the fuse. And why did she do it? I asked the question that had been tormenting me since I arrived in that house. Why does she hate me so much? Teresa sighed, playing with her cup. She doesn't hate you, she fears you and envies you. She envies me. You're young, you're beautiful, you have her son. And now it turns out you also have your own power. A power she can't touch. Carol has spent her life defined by what she controls this house, her children, her small circle. It's her fortress built after being widowed very young. Your father-in-law was a charming but weak man. And when he died, she clung to the only thing she had: the property, the authority over her children. You with your independence with this house. She made a vague gesture. You represent everything she doesn't have and never will. And yesterday she tried to reassert her control over you in the only way she knows financially. And it backfired spectacularly. Her words made sense, a cruel but logical sense. So what do I do now? That, my dear, only you can decide. But a piece of advice from an old woman who has seen many family battles: don't fight this war from the trench of your money. Don't use this. She pointed to the kitchen, the house, as a weapon. Use it as what it is: your home. Invite Dan to build it with you. And Carol, well, you'll have to set boundaries with Carol, but try to understand that behind the harpy is a woman terrified of being left alone and irrelevant. As we spoke, my phone vibrated on the counter. It was a text from Kevin. Erica, we need to talk. It's important. Can I come see you? I know where you live. A wave of disgust washed over me. Kevin, the ambitious brother. What could he want? Trouble? Teresa asked, seeing my expression. Kevin wants to come over. Her usually calm eyes hardened slightly. Be careful with Kevin, Erica. He's Carol's favorite son. Not because she loves him more, but because he thinks like her. He's practical, ambitious, and sees opportunities where others see problems. And right now, you are a huge opportunity. I'm not giving him any money, I said immediately, firmly. It's not just money, it's influence, connections, the shine of your family name. Don't underestimate what people would do to rub shoulders with the Winthrops. She stood up. I'm going. You have to manage this. But remember, you are stronger than you think. Your mother raised you for this. And Dan, give him time. But don't give him all the power. You're hurt too. She hugged me, a warm, firm hug that comforted me immensely. When she left, the house fell back into a silence that now felt a little less hostile. Her words had given me a framework to understand the chaos. But Kevin's message was a dark cloud on the horizon. I decided not to answer. I owed him no explanations. Instead, I went upstairs to the bedrooms. I had chosen a smaller one facing the inner courtyard to sleep in. I didn't feel I had the right to the huge, cold master suite. I lay down on the unmade bed, staring at the ceiling. The physical and emotional exhaustion overcame me, and I fell into a restless sleep. While I slept, Dan wandered aimlessly through New York. He had left the townhouse on 72nd Street with his soul in pieces. He walked without direction, his steps unconsciously leading him to his studio, a modest space in Williamsburg, where he painted and taught occasional classes. As he closed the door behind him, the familiar smell of turpentine oil paint and wood dust gave him a false sense of normalcy. Here he was, him, Dan Valverde, the painter. Not the heiress's husband, not Carol's son. Just him, his canvases, and his ghosts. But normalcy was an illusion. He collapsed into the old battered armchair, covered in paint stains, and buried his face in his hands. The image of Erica in that enormous living room, so vulnerable, yet so in command of it all, was seared into his mind. She had lied to him for years. Every time they complained about rent prices, every time his mother made a comment about the uncertain future of artists, she had kept quiet, knowing she had the solution within arm's reach in a drawer full of documents. The anger returned hot and bitter. But beneath the anger was fear. Fear of having been a fool. Fear that his love, pure and simple, was just a whim for her, a bohemian adventure before she returned to her real world of townhouses and trust funds. And there was another, more shameful emotion peeking through a hint of relief. Relief at the thought of never having to worry about money again, of being able to paint whatever he wanted, without depending on selling cheesy paintings to tourists. That thought made him sick to his stomach. His phone vibrated. It was his mother, the 10th call, and a message from Kevin. "Bro, we need to talk. This thing with Erica is getting ugly. Call me." He ignored both. He couldn't deal with them. Not yet. Instead, he opened his phone's browser and with clumsy fingers typed Winthrop Fortune. The results took his breath away. Articles from financial newspapers, entries on society blogs, news of charity auctions. The Winthrops weren't just rich. They were part of that discreet, powerful aristocracy that owned half of Connecticut and held shares in banks, energy companies, construction firms. The blurry photo of his parents-in-law's wedding that Lisa had found was just the tip of the iceberg. Erica hadn't just inherited a house. She had inherited a legacy. He closed his eyes. What was he going to do? Move in with her. The idea gave him claustrophobia. Everything was too big, too perfect, too foreign. Stay with his mother. That would be a defeat. A return to adolescence, and it would mean siding with Carol. Stay here in his studio. That was a temporary, childish solution. He had no answers, only questions drilling into his brain, and a dull ache in his chest that told him, despite everything he missed, his wife. The Erica he thought he knew. On Park Avenue, Carol's frustration was simmering. Dan wasn't answering. Teresa had gone as a peace ambassador and hadn't returned. And Kevin was at her apartment on the phone with his contact at the county records office, confirming details. Yes, free of liens. In the name of Erica Winthrop Mendoza. Date of acquisition 6 months ago. Wow. Just after the wedding, Kevin thought. He hung up and turned to his mother, who was drinking her third black coffee as if it were water. See? Even the timing is calculated. She married him without telling him, and then she put the house in her name. Why? To protect it from him, or to make sure that if something goes wrong, he doesn't touch a thing. They didn't sign a prenup, Carol said bitterly. I suggested it, before the wedding. I told Dan it was the sensible thing to do. But he got angry, said it was distrustful that love doesn't need paperwork. She let out a short, harsh laugh. Love? Look where his love is now. In a penthouse on 72nd Street. Exactly, Kevin said, rubbing his hands together, a gesture he made when he saw a business opportunity. Without a prenup in a normal marriage, Dan would get half of what's earned during the marriage. But this is inheritance. It's hers. Unless she co-mingles it or puts it in both their names, he's not entitled to a damn cent. Carol looked at him furiously. And you think that's okay? That this woman has everything and my son has nothing? Of course I don't think it's okay. That's why we have to act. We have to make Dan realize he's being used, that she kept him in the dark to have total control. And we have to get that wealth shared. For the good of the family. For the good of the family, or for yours, Kevin? Carol asked with a penetrating stare. Kevin didn't flinch. It's the same thing, Mum. If Dan has access to that money, he can help you. He can help me set up my import business for real, not that shabby warehouse I have. We can all live better. It's a matter of justice. He's her husband. He has rights, even if they're only moral. Carol nodded slowly. Kevin's logic, twisted but persuasive, was sinking in. Dan had rights, and she, as his mother, had a duty to make sure they weren't trampled. The fear of losing her son was transforming into anger, and the anger into determination. "What do you propose?" she asked, her voice now cold tactical. "First, we have to isolate Dan from her. Let him spend time here with us. Remember what family is. You have to be the understanding mother, the one who apologizes, the one who suffers. You have to make him see that he's the victim here, not her. And second, we need information about the trust, about the true extent of her wealth. And for that," Kevin said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "we might have to make a tactical alliance." "With whom?" "With Aunt Teresa. She seems to have taken a liking to our dear Erica. Let's use that. Let her gain her trust, find things out." Carol frowned. "Teresa won't be a spy. She doesn't have to be a spy. Just listen. Spend time with her and tell us what she hears. Teresa is family after all. Her loyalty should be with us, not with a newcomer who has lied to us." Carol wasn't entirely convinced, but she had no better plan. She nodded. "All right. I'll talk to Teresa. You keep digging for information. And find your brother. Bring him home." "I will," Kevin said, rising. "Let me handle my brother. You just worry about being the loving, heartbroken mother." When Kevin left, Carol was alone in her living room, too neat, too quiet. She looked at her wedding photo on the mantelpiece. She young and radiant, next to a man with a kind smile. He had given her a comfortable life, but never this level of wealth, and she had had to manage alone after he was gone. She had fought to keep this apartment, to raise her children with decency, and now this girl with her inheritance fallen from the sky wanted to take her son. And maybe, just maybe, she was entitled to a piece of that wealth, for justice. For the years she had fought alone. The idea planted by Kevin began to take twisted, venomous root in her heart. The game was no longer just about control or a son's love. Now it was also about money. And Carol Valverde, who had survived widowhood and austerity, knew how to fight for money. She had done it her whole life. The afternoon fell over New York, tinted a cold gold when I decided I was done, crying and waiting. The townhouse, despite its splendor, felt like a golden cage. Teresa's words echoed, "Don't fight this war from the trench of your money." She was right. I had reacted, I had counterattacked. But now I needed to take deliberate action. And that started with Dan. I couldn't let distance and his family's venom poison the wound. I dressed with determination, choosing a simple black dress, nothing pretentious. I didn't want to intimidate. I just wanted to talk to my husband. I grabbed my bag and keys, and as I opened the door, I came face to face with him. Dan was there on the landing, his hand raised as if about to ring the bell. He looked as surprised as I was. He was wearing the same wrinkled clothes, but he seemed calmer, though a deep sadness was etched in his eyes. "Erica," he said, lowering his hand. "I was coming to find you." I replied, my voice a whisper. "I was coming to see you." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Can we go inside?" I nodded and stepped back to let him pass. This time his gaze wasn't one of empty astonishment, but of calmer observation. He walked to the living room and stood before the windows, contemplating the park. "It's beautiful," he said at last without turning. "And you're right. It has no soul. But it could have one." My heart skipped a beat. Dan turned. "I've spent all day thinking, getting angry, feeling like an idiot, a poor fool, a gold digger with no gold to dig." A crooked grimace crossed his face. "And then I thought about you, the Erica I know, the one who gets excited about an ugly painting in a run-down gallery, the one who laughs when she burns the omelette, the one who hugged me the day my first important painting didn't sell. That woman isn't a fraud. She's real." Tears blurred my vision. "She's the only woman there is. I know." I know that now." He approached slowly. "But you hurt me, Erica. A deep hurt. I didn't feel like your partner. I felt like your secret, like something that had to be protected from the reality of who you are." "It wasn't like that," I protested, but with less force. Because maybe in some dark corner there was some truth to his words. Maybe not. But the effect was the same. He stopped a few feet from me. "If we're going to get through this, there can't be any more secrets. None. And there can't be two sides. It can't be you against my family, and I can't be between my family and you. It has to be you and me against the world, if necessary. But together." Those were the words I had longed to hear. "And how do we do that, your mother, Kevin? My mother is my problem. I'll handle her. I'll set clear, firm boundaries. She will not disrespect you again. And Kevin," his face hardened. "Kevin is another story. I know he contacted you. Be careful with him, Erica. My brother smells an opportunity from miles away. I'm not giving him a single dollar. It's not just money. It's influence, status. Your last name opens doors he's been trying to kick down for years." He sighed. "Are you sure you want this? That you want to try with me with all this mess?" I looked around at the cold, perfect house, and then at him. Imperfect, pained, real. My home wasn't within these walls. My home was wherever he was. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "But not here. Not yet. This house is scary, it overwhelms us. Can we go somewhere, just you and me, to talk, to remember who we were before everything went wrong?" A genuine smile, the first in what felt like an eternity, appeared on his lips. "Yes, please. Let's get out of this museum." We left together, and as I closed the door, I felt an immense relief. We walked aimlessly as we used to in the beginning, and ended up in a shabby, cozy tea shop on a side street in the East Village, full of students and colourful characters. There, over cups of mint tea, we began to really talk. I told him everything: my mother's wishes, my fear, my stupidity. He told me about his anger, his humiliation, his fear of not being enough. It was painful, but it was a cleansing pain, like disinfecting a wound. Meanwhile, on Park Avenue, the family strategy was falling apart. Carol, following Kevin's script, had called Teresa to ask her to probe Erica. Her sister-in-law's response left her stunned. "No, Carol," Teresa said with firm calmness. "I'm not going to spy on that girl for you. What you need to do is apologize to her. For real. Or you will lose your son. And I'm telling you this as someone who lost her husband because she didn't know when to shut up and when to apologize." "You don't understand," Carol cried, on the verge of tears of frustration. "She's taking him away." "You're pushing him away," Teresa retorted and hung up. Kevin, for his part, had gone to Dan's studio and hadn't found him. Furious, he called his phone again and again, until Dan, in a moment of pause at the tea shop, turned it off. "It's Kevin," he said wearily. "He must be fuming. What does he want?" "The usual. to take advantage. Don't pay him any mind, Erica. Promise me. I promise. But Kevin was not a man who gave up easily. Unable to find his brother, he made a decision. If the mountain won't come to Mohammed. He looked up the address of the gallery where Erica worked. He wouldn't go to the townhouse. That would be too obvious. He would approach her on her neutral ground. There he thought he could talk to her without Dan's influence. Our truce in the tea shop lasted a few precious hours. We didn't fix everything, not by a long shot, but we opened a door we thought was sealed. When we left, it was already night, and Dan walked me back to the door of the 72nd Street building. He didn't come in. I'm going to my mother's house, he said, seeing my immediate look of concern. To talk to her, to lay the cards on the table, just like we did. It's time. Do you want me to go with you? He shook his head. This is a conversation I have to have alone, but afterward, I'd like to come here. Sleep on the couch if I have to. Or in that small room you mentioned. To start. The bed is big enough, I whispered, blushing despite everything. He smiled, a little sad, a little hopeful. One step at a time. Okay, but yes, I'd like to stay. He kissed me. It was a cautious kiss, full of unanswered questions, but also of promise. Then he left, and I went up to the house with a considerably lighter heart. The next day I went to work. I needed normalcy, the routine of the gallery, the smell of paper and fresh paint. My boss, Sylvia, a woman in her 60s with impeccable taste and zero patience for drama, greeted me with a raised eyebrow. I thought you'd be on your honeymoon or organizing your palace, she said, handing me a stack of catalogues. I needed to work, I replied simply. Good. Emotional turmoil is bad for business. Here we talk about art, not soap operas. But her gaze was a little softer than usual. The morning passed calmly, attending to a couple of clients, checking invoices for shipments. Around noon, the little bell on the door chimed, and Kevin walked in. My body tensed immediately. He was well dressed, with a smile that tried to be folksy, but didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. Erica. So good to see you here in your element. Kevin. What brings you here? I don't recall you being interested in contemporary art. It's always a good time to start, he said with false joviality, scanning the gallery with a look that assessed the price of the works more than their artistic value. Besides, I wanted to talk to you alone without family interference. Whatever you have to say to me, you can say it here. He moved closer, lowering his voice. It's about Dan, and about your situation. I think we can help each other. I said nothing, just watched him with my arms crossed. My silence encouraged him to continue. Look, Erica, I know there have been misunderstandings. My mother can be strict, but she only wants what's best for Dan. And now with your new situation, we're all a little lost. Dan is confused, hurt. He paused dramatically. He's afraid he's not good enough for you. I'm afraid that will end your marriage. His words were calculated to prick right where it hurt most. Dan and I are talking. We'll handle our marriage. Of course. But family is important. We can be a great support or a great obstacle. He dropped the threat smoothly. I, for example, have a business project, importing wines from small vineyards, with a little seed capital and especially with connections. The Winthrop name opens a lot of doors in that world. It could take off, and if I'm stable, happy, the whole family would be more at ease, more willing to accept the changes. There it was, the proposition. He didn't ask for money directly, but the insinuation was clear. Invest in me, and I'll guarantee you family peace. It disgusted me. Kevin, I said. keeping my voice calm despite the fury boiling inside me. I'm not going to give you money, nor am I going to use my mother's name for your business dealings. My relationship with Dan is not a commercial transaction, and my inheritance is not a common fund for the Valverde family to access in exchange for sympathy. His smile vanished, replaced by a mask of coldness. Well, that's a shame. I thought you were smarter. Look, Erica, you're not in a position to be so high and mighty. You came into this family lying. That weakens you. Dan might be interested to know, for example, that your lawyer, that Martha person, is researching how to protect your inheritance in case of a… what's it called? Oh, yes, a divorce. It was a lie, a blatant and venomous lie, but he said it with such conviction that I knew it was the kind of rumor he would spread without hesitation. Get out of here, Kevin, I said, pointing to the door with a finger that trembled slightly with rage. As you wish, but think about what I said. Family is forever. And without us, you'll end up alone in your huge townhouse with all your money and no one to share it with. He turned and walked out, leaving a bitter taste in the air. I leaned against the counter, breathing deeply. I had underestimated Kevin's baseness. It wasn't just ambition, it was cruelty. That night when Dan came to the house on 72nd Street, he arrived with a face marked by exhaustion, but with a certain determination. I talked to my mother, he said as we sat in the kitchen eating an omelette we had made together, lopsided and delicious. I told her I was moving in here with you, that this is my home now too, if you'll have me, and that I would not tolerate one more comment against you. She started crying, saying I was abandoning her, that you were a gold digger. It was tough. I'm sorry, I murmured, taking his hand. Don't be sorry, it had to be done. He took a bite of the omelette. But there's more. Kevin was there at the end trying to pump me for information, asking about your finances, about plans. He gave me this whole speech about family unity, about how we shouldn't let money separate us. It was disgusting. He came to see me at the gallery, I confessed then, and told him about the conversation, the veiled proposal, the thinly veiled threat. Dan's face darkened. He threatened you. More or less. He said he could make you believe Martha was preparing divorce papers. Dan let out a dry, forceful curse. That idiot. Don't listen to him, Erica. Don't give him a second of your attention. First thing tomorrow, I'm going to talk to him and set him straight. No, please. I don't want any more fights. We have enough. It's not a fight. It's setting a boundary with my brother. His gaze was firm. You and me, we promised. Against the world, but together. And that includes against my brother and his schemes. I looked into his eyes, seeing the determination, the love, and the clean anger, not at me, but for me. For the first time since that dinner, I felt we were truly a team. I promise, I said, and that night for the first time we slept together in the townhouse. Not in the master suite, but in the small room holding each other, listening to the unfamiliar noises of the big house, beginning slowly to turn it into a home. The future was uncertain, full of family plots and resentments to diffuse, but we were together. And that was the only fortress that truly mattered. The awakening was strange. Morning light filtered through the blinds of a room that wasn't mine, but the warmth of a familiar body beside me made everything okay for a few seconds. Dan slept soundly, an expression on his face more peaceful than it had been in days. I closed my eyes, clinging to that moment of peace. I knew it would be brief. Martha called while we were making coffee in the enormous kitchen, which was starting to feel a little less hostile. Good morning. I've checked the building's access log. Kevin Valverde tried to enter last night at 10:17 p.m. The intercom registered his attempt, but since he didn't have a code, he couldn't get in. My blood ran cold. He was here, at the door. It seems so. probably after seeing you at the gallery. He wanted to continue the conversation. I suggest you change the access codes and give instructions to the security company. He's not on the authorized list, but it's better to be safe. Do it, I said without hesitation. The invasion infuriated me, but it also scared me. Is there anything else? Yes. I've received an inquiry indirectly from a lawyer named Rojas. He was asking in general terms about the contestability of inheritances received just after a marriage if there was no prenuptial agreement. He didn't mention names, but the timing is interesting. I looked at Dan, who was watching me with concern from the other side of the island. It's Kevin. He's looking for ways to touch the inheritance. He can't, Martha said firmly. It's prior property, very clear. But the fact that he's asking means he's getting advice, and that's a declaration of intent. Be careful. I hung up and told Dan. His face darkened. This has gone too far. I can't believe my own brother. We have to stop him, Dan. Now. Before he invents something more serious. What can we do? A restraining order that would be a scandal, wouldn't it? First, we need to meet all of us face to face, so everything is clear once and for all. The idea came to me suddenly, driven by a mix of exhaustion and determination. A family meeting, here in my house, tonight. Dan rolled his eyes. That's like throwing a match into a powder keg. Exactly, but at least it will explode where everyone can see, and we'll know where the fault lines are. If we go on like this with Kevin lurking and your mother crying, it will be a war of attrition. I'm not going to put up with that. Either it breaks, or it's fixed. He looked at me, evaluating my resolve. Finally, he nodded. You're right. Call me a coward. But I prefer an open front to being shot in the back. I'll call my mum and Teresa. You call Kevin. No, you call him too. He's your brother. And tell him if he doesn't come, I will consider it a renunciation of any kind of relationship or communication with us from now on, including access to any information about our assets. I used his own tactics against him. Dan nodded, understanding the play. The calls were as tense as one would expect. Carol, on the other end of the line, started with reproaches. So you're taking her side against your family again, but ended up agreeing, drawn by the opportunity to finally enter the famous townhouse. Teresa accepted immediately, her voice grave. It's better if someone with common sense is there, she said. And Kevin, when Dan gave him the ultimatum, laughed an unpleasant sound. Wanna play that way, little brother? Fine. I'll be there. Curious to see your little love nest. The meeting was set for 8 p.m. The day felt endless. Dan went to his studio, needing to paint to clear his head. I stayed, trying to work from home, but it was impossible to concentrate. Instead, I walked through the house, mentally preparing for the invasion. It wasn't just a physical space. It was my territory. And tonight, I would have to defend it. At 7:30, Dan returned. He brought 2 small paintings, abstract canvases, full of vibrant colors and energetic gestures. For the walls, he said, almost shyly, so there's something of us. It was the most beautiful gesture he could have made. We hung one in the foyer and another in the kitchen. Suddenly the house breathed differently. At 8 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. It was Teresa, impeccable as always, with a bouquet of seasonal flowers. For the hostess, she said, and her smile was tacit support. Minutes later, Carol arrived. I saw her through the video intercom, adjusting her cardigan, looking at the facade with a mixture of disdain and greed. As she came up in the elevator, she kept her back straight, but her eyes couldn't help but widen as she entered the foyer. She scanned everything with a quick professional glance, evaluating, comparing, and undoubtedly finding herself at a disadvantage. She didn't say hello, just nodded. Kevin was the last to arrive. He came in with a wolfish grin, dressed in a suit too flashy for the occasion. Well, well, Impressive, Erica. My congratulations, Dan. Brother, looks like you landed on your feet. Sit down, Kevin, Dan said, not greeting him. His tone was sharp. We sat in the living room. The space was so large the group seemed lost. I stood leaning against the fireplace to have a certain visual advantage. Dan stood beside me. Opposite us on the sofa was Carol with Teresa next to her in an armchair, and Kevin shamelessly occupying the center of the other sofa like a king. Well, I began, breaking the charged silence. Thank you for coming. I think we're all tired of misunderstandings and half-truths, so I thought it would be best to clear everything up once and for all here, where we can all see and hear. An excellent idea, Kevin said, rubbing his hands together. Transparency. That's what this family is missing. Shut up, Kevin, Carol said unexpectedly. We all turned to look at her. She was pale, but her gaze was fixed on me. Erica is right. This is unsustainable. I came to listen. Kevin shot his mother a look of surprise and warning, but she ignored him. Good, I continued. Let's start at the beginning. Yes, I am Erica Winthrop Mendoza. I inherited this house and other assets from my mother who died 2 years ago. I didn't tell Dan until after the wedding. That was a mistake, a big mistake. I've acknowledged it and I've apologized. He has decided to forgive me and give our marriage a chance. That matter, therefore, is between the two of us. A very convenient mistake, Kevin muttered. Kevin, Teresa said in a calm but firm voice. Let her speak. Second point, I went on, fixing my gaze on Carol. Carol asked me to pay rent to live in your house. For me, that was the signal that you would never consider me part of your family on equal terms. That's why I left. That's why I revealed what I did. I reacted out of pride and pain. But I'm not here today to apologize for that. I'm here to make it clear how things are going to be from now on. Carol opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off, raising a hand. Wait, your turn will come. But first, the third point. I looked at Kevin. You, Kevin, have tried to emotionally blackmail me. You've insinuated that I should finance your businesses. You've lurked outside my front door and you've consulted a lawyer to see if you could touch my inheritance. That ends right now. You will not receive a single dollar from me. You will not use my family name for any connections. And if you come near my home or my workplace again, without my permission, I will call the police. And I have an excellent lawyer who will ensure that any insinuation or threat you make has consequences. Is that clear? The silence was absolute. The rawness of my words, the cold legal tone hung in the room. Kevin turned red, then pale. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you of the rules, I corrected. This is not your playground, and my inheritance is not your prize. You're a greedy witch, he shouted, getting to his feet. You think because you have money you can trample on this family. You came in here lying, you snuck in, and now you throw it in our faces that we're not good enough for you. Enough, Kevin, Dan yelled, stepping forward. Erica is right. All you see is money. You've been sniffing around since day one. Do you really care about me, or only about what you can get through me? Of course I care about you. You're my brother, Kevin shouted, but his voice sounded false. But she's blinded you. Can't you see she's isolating you from your family? Soon she'll ask you to sign a paper renouncing everything and leave you on the street. That's a lie, I said with glacial calm. There is no and will be no such paper. Dan is my husband. What is mine is ours. But ours means him and me, not the extended family. See? Kevin turned to Carol, looking for an ally. See, Mum. She's excluding us. She wants to keep Dan and everything for herself and leave us out. This is her revenge for the rent. Carol was staring intently at her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When she looked up, she didn't look at Kevin. She looked at me and then at Dan. There were tears in her eyes, but also something else, a painful clarity. "Kevin, shut up," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, just shut up." "Mum." I said shut up. Her shout, so unusual for her, startled us all. She took a difficult, deep breath. He's right about one thing, Dan," she said, addressing her son. "Erica is isolating you, but not out of malice, out of protection." Her eyes met mine, and I isolated you, Dan, for years, out of fear of losing you, fear of being alone. That's why I clung to the house, to the rules. And that's why I asked Erica for the money. It wasn't about the money. It was about showing who was in charge, so she would know that in my house I made the decisions. A tear slid down her cheek. And look at the result. I've achieved exactly what I feared. You've both left. The living room fell silent. Even Kevin seemed speechless, watching his main ally crumble and in her crumbling prove him wrong. "Mom," Dan said, his voice cracking. He took a step toward her but stopped. "No, let me finish." Carol wiped her tears with a finger, composing herself with a visible effort. "Erica, you're right. I treated you badly. I didn't welcome you. I saw you as a threat, not as the woman who makes my son happy. And when I found out about your inheritance, I was even more scared because I thought you would take him away from me forever with it." She sighed. But last night, talking to Teresa, she made me see that what I was doing was repeating what my mother-in-law did to me. And I don't want to be that woman. Kevin stood up furiously. "I can't believe this. Now you're taking her side after everything we talked about." "I'm not taking anyone's side, Kevin," Carol said with infinite weariness. "I'm taking my son's side and his happiness. And if his happiness is here with her, then I will have to learn to accept it and to respect his wife." It was surrender. Not a happy surrender, but an exhausted, painful, yet real one. Dan went to her and knelt in front of his mother, taking her hands. "Mum." "No, it's okay," she said, stroking his face. "It's okay, son. I've been a fool." Kevin watched the scene as if it were a frame from a movie he despised. His plan was dissolving before his eyes. His mother was capitulating, his brother was pulling away, and the prize, the inheritance, was slipping through his fingers. "This is pathetic," he spat. "So you're all just going to grovel before the queen of the townhouse? Fine. Count me out of this charade." He headed for the door, but before leaving he turned. "But this isn't over, Erica. My brother's thing is temporary. Blood is thicker than water. And money. Money always shows people's true colours in the end. We'll see how long this idyllic romance lasts, when our little painter runs out of charm, and you get tired of playing the understanding wife." "Kevin, get out of my house," I said without raising my voice. "Now." He shot me one last look of pure hatred and left, slamming the door with a dry bang that echoed through the entire house. The tension deflated, leaving an exhausted void. Carol was still crying silently. Teresa got up, went to the kitchen, and returned with a glass of water for her sister-in-law. "I think that's enough for today," Teresa said softly. "Carol, would you like me to take you home?" Carol nodded weakly. She stood up, leaning on Dan. Before leaving, she stopped in front of me. "Erica, I don't expect you to forgive me, but can I come back someday? For coffee? No demands, no judgments." I saw Dan looking at me with a silent plea in his eyes, and I saw the proud, broken woman before me. It wasn't friendship, it wasn't affection, but it was a start, but it was a necessary truce. "Yes, Carol. You can come back whenever you want." She nodded, another tear falling, but this time perhaps of relief. and she left, leaning on Teresa. When the door closed, I collapsed onto the sofa, trembling. The adrenaline was dissipating, leaving me wiped out. Dan sat beside me and wrapped his arms around me. "That was brutal," he whispered into my hair. "But necessary," I said, sinking into his embrace. "Your mother. I didn't expect that." "Me neither. But I think for the first time she was speaking the truth without Kevin's poison in her ear." "And Kevin?" I asked with a shiver. Dan sighed. "Kevin? That's another war. But at least now we're warned. And we're together." "Together," I repeated. And the word this time tasted like victory. Not a victory over someone, but a victory for us. We had walked through the fire of direct confrontation and had come out the other side wounded, exhausted, but alive and together. The townhouse was still huge and cold, but that night with Dan by my side and the ghost of Kevin, banished at least temporarily, it began to feel a little more like what it was meant to be, a refuge, not a battlefield. The family war wasn't over, but the decisive battle at least he had won. 6 months later, the New York spring unfolded gloriously over Central Park, and its green, fresh breath wafted through the open doors of the terrace. The townhouse on 72nd Street was no longer a museum. It smelled of fresh coffee oil paint and turpentine, and of the basil plants Dan had potted along the railing. His paintings weren't just hanging on the walls, they were propped up on the floor, half-finished next to paint-stained newspapers. My books were piled on tables. There was a crumpled blanket on the sofa, and in the kitchen 2 dirty mugs from breakfast. It was a glorious mess. It was life. Dan, sitting at the terrace table with a sketchbook, looked up and smiled as he saw me leaning against the doorframe. "What?" "Nothing. I just like seeing you here." "It's my house," he said. And this time the word carried no weight of doubt or irony. It was a simple, full statement. The months following the explosive family meeting had not been easy, but they had been clear. We had established steel boundaries with Kevin. After his angry exit, he tried one last play, sending his lawyer, Mr. Rojas, with a letter suggesting family mediation to avoid further conflict and ensure harmony and mutual support, which was in practice a veiled request for money. Martha responded with an even more forceful letter warning of legal action for harassment and slander if he persisted. Kevin, finding himself without his mother's support and facing the real risk of a lawsuit he couldn't afford, backed down. He stopped calling. We learned through Teresa that he had secured a bank loan for his import business at an exorbitant interest rate. That was his path. We had cut ties with ours. Carol, for her part, kept her word. She came for coffee. It was an awkward, silent afternoon where only Teresa spoke, then another where she timidly asked about Dan's paintings. Slowly the ice began to break, not in a torrent of affection, but in a slow drip of respect and careful distance. She learned to call before coming to, not comment on the decor or our choices. One day she found an old photo album of my mother's on a table, and flipping through it said without looking at me, "She was very beautiful, and so elegant. You can see she loved you very much." It was the first disinterested compliment she had ever given me. A small miracle. The real surprise came later. On a rainy afternoon, Carol arrived with a container of lentil soup. "I just made too much," she murmured, avoiding our gaze. It was the lentil soup Dan loved. The 3 of us ate it in the large kitchen, and for the first time the conversation flowed smoothly, talking about the weather, an exhibition at the MoMA, the price of tomatoes. It was normal, a precious, fragile commodity we cherished. Today, however, was a special day. We had invited Carol and Teresa for lunch. It wasn't an act of reconciliation because that peace, though tense, had already been achieved. It was more a celebration of the new normal and of the news Dan and I had been keeping for a week and had decided to share. Carol arrived punctually with a bouquet of lilies, Teresa a few minutes later with a homemade apple pie. The atmosphere was relaxed, even joyful. Dan poured the wine while I finished plating the chicken. "This house is beautiful," Teresa said, looking around with approval. "It has a soul now. You can tell you live in it." "That's because Erica has let this disaster of a painter invade everything," Dan joked, wrapping an arm around my waist. Carol smiled a small but genuine smile. "He was always a disaster, but he's her disaster." This was the moment. Dan and I exchanged a look. He nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Carol Teresa, we have something to tell you." I began putting down the serving spoon. I wiped my hands on my apron, suddenly nervous. "Something good." Both women looked at us expectantly. Carol held her breath. Dan took my hand. "We're going to be parents. Erica is pregnant." The silence that followed was brief but charged. Teresa let out a little shriek of joy and got up to hug us. "Congratulations." "What wonderful news." Carol, on the other hand, had frozen. Her face was a whirlwind of emotions: surprise, disbelief, joy, and a terrifying fear of spoiling the moment. Her eyes filled with tears. "Mum," Dan said softly. A baby," she managed to say, her voice breaking. "For real?" I confirmed, feeling the emotion choke me up. "We're 7 weeks along. Everything is fine." Carol stood up, then stumbling a little. She didn't come to hug me. She went to Dan and took his face in her hands, looking at him intently. "My boy," she whispered. Then she turned to me. Tears were streaming freely down her cheeks, but she made no effort to contain them. "Erica, thank you." She didn't say congratulations. She said thank you. And in that one word was the entire journey of the past few months, the recognition, the respect, the acceptance. She was thanking me for giving her a grandchild, thanking me for allowing her to remain in her son's life, thanking me perhaps for a second chance she never thought she deserved. "There's nothing to thank me for," I said. And then I opened my arms. She stepped into them, stiff at first, then with a convulsive hug full of pent-up emotion. We weren't friends. Maybe we never would be. But we were family. A strange family full of scars, but with new, stronger foundations because we knew what it cost to build them. The lunch was joyful, filled with plans and memories of when Dan and Kevin were little. For the first time, Carol spoke of her husband Dan's father without bitterness, only with the nostalgia of someone who has begun to make peace with the past. Kevin was not mentioned. It was a deliberate absence, an empty space that no longer hurt, but simply was. When they left as evening fell, Dan and I stood on the terrace, watching the sun paint the treetops orange. "Do you think Kevin will find out?" I asked, resting my head on his shoulder. "Probably. New York is a small town, but it doesn't matter anymore. He chose his path." He wrapped his arm around me, resting his hand on my still flat belly. "This is our path, full of paint diapers and your mother playing bossy grandma." "For sure," I laughed. "And yours will be too." "I hope so," he said, and his voice was soft. "I hope so." I had gained many things in the past few months. I had won my space, my dignity, my strengthened marriage. But looking back, perhaps the most valuable thing hadn't been winning but letting go. Letting go of the need for approval, the fear of conflict, the idea that to be happy I needed everyone to love me. Now I had the one who mattered, and I had for the first time a home. Not an inherited townhouse, but a home built with effort, with love, with truths spoken in time, and with the courage to stand up when necessary, even to the ghosts of one's own blood. Night was beginning to fall over New York. Inside the house, in the living room, the painting Dan had made for me, an abstract portrait of the two of us, with strokes of gold over a deep blue background, shone in the last light. Outside, the city buzzed indifferent and magnificent. But here on our terrace, with the future growing inside me and the man I loved by my side, there was only peace. The peace that is earned, not given. And that made it indestructible.